Good afternoon again. As we come to the fourth session, the fourth session is a panel discussion on introducing values and ethics in modern education. Are previous effort sufficient? For this session, may I please welcome Professor Vivek Suneja ji, chairperson of this session, on the dais. And I would like to welcome respected panelists to take their seats on the dais again. Dr. Anita Dudani, Wen Kabir Saxena, Mr. Ajir Vidya, Professor Vivek Rajak, Dr. Nakma Siddiqui, and Dr. J. Kishan Parishar. I would like to give a brief introduction of Professor Vivek Suneja ji, a chairperson of this session. Professor Vivek Suneja ji teaches strategy and international business at the Faculty of Management Studies, and it's the Dean of the University of Delhi. As a Felix Scholar, Dr. Suneja studied for his doctorate at the University of Reading in United Kingdom. His PhD was supervised by Professor Mark Kesson, the founding father of the discipline of international business strategy. For the several years, Dr. Suneja has worked in the prestigious international institutions, including the University of Salford, Manchester, University of Reading, and the Open University Business School in the United Kingdom. He has also been teaching on the Oxford Study Abroad program of George Mason University, Washington, USA. Dr. Suneja has done consulting works for several leading international firms. His research is in the area of strategic management, international business, marketing, and economic policy. He has written several books and papers in these areas and done editorial review work for international journals and conferences. With further ado, for the panel discussion, all the respected panelists will be given 5 minutes to speak from their own specialization, and followed by half an hour discussion among panelists. Now, I would like to give a chair to Mr. Vivek Suneja ji. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Does everybody have details about our panelists, or do I need to read these out? You do? Okay, I'm just making sure you... Look, the chairperson is like the vice president of India. Not just the president, vice president. His only job is to occupy the chair. I've done that, so my dharma and karma is all clear. Doji, is that right? So, mujhe to mukti mil gaya bhai. The rest of you are in trouble. Accumulate to sir bahut kiya, ye baat to sahi. So, yeah. It's a real pleasure to be here. Emotional intelligence. So glad, for one, that this is happening. And students are here. I saw this parliament session that we had. It was so brilliant because it was active learning. And this is not just for the panelists. This is essentially for everybody who's here, but particularly the students. So it's absolutely brilliant. If you pick up the morning newspapers, you realize how important this is. This cannot be overemphasized. What is intelligence? I'll just take a couple of minutes and then hand over to my distinguished panelists. What is intelligence? Well, I guess intelligence is first choosing your goal wisely and then finding the best way to get there. That's intelligence. So what is the goal? As His Holiness has always said, the goal is happiness. And therefore, to try and find the best ways to be happy is intelligence. That's it. How can we be happy in a genuine sense? And can we be happy if others around us are unhappy? On the other hand, can others around us be happy if we are unhappy? So that's dependent co-arising. We cannot share what we don't have. So if we are unhappy, we'll share unhappiness. I mean, we have the director of the Delhi School of Economics sitting right in front of me who can tell us about this more. And I hope she manages to get the gate between the Faculty of Management Studies and Delhi School of Economics opened, something I failed as a Pro-Vice Chancellor of Delhi University to do. So I'm requesting her that if she can accomplish that Herculean task. But if I walk around the corridors in my department, nobody from my department is here, so I can say this. I'm not sure whether people want to be happy. I'm not sure people in Delhi want to be happy. The way they drive in Delhi, I think people are addicted to unhappiness. They don't want to be happy. Maybe they've never known happiness. I often wonder why Buddha began his first truth, noble truth, saying there's suffering in the world. Then he said, well, there's a cause to suffering. Then he says, if you then activate the remedies, which is the Noble Eightfold Path, then you eliminate suffering. He could have done something else. He could have said, there can be happiness in the world. Happiness can have a cause. If you activate the causes of happiness, you'll become happy. No, he didn't say it like that. There's suffering in the world. Maybe he realized some people have never tasted genuine happiness. They only take pleasure and ephemeral, egoic, power-related satisfactions, which is what Delhi does to be happiness. So if you have cell phones, the latest, of course, and you have the latest BMW, and if you can boast high status or income or high position in your institution, that's supposed to be happiness. And people maybe have never known happiness. So I'd like the panelists to talk about this. What is happiness? How do we become happy? And as far as emotions are concerned, well, we can use emotions to be happy. We can use thought to be happy. And thought and emotion are not distinctive things. In the Buddhists, they're all part of mental formations. Emotions, how the body reacts to thinking. In psychology, there's cognitive, there's behavioral, there's all kinds of psychology. Well, they're not different parts. I mean, there's different facets of the same one phenomenon, which is the way we think and feel. But sometimes, unconsciously, we're not even thinking. Some of those conditioned patterns of thought provoke emotions, and we don't even know what the thoughts behind those emotions are. We're just led by the emotions, which have become so deeply entrenched that we've forgotten even the connection with thought. And therefore, the question is, how do we bring intelligence into our thinking, our emotions? And perhaps what Buddhism ultimately says is, until you eliminate the concept of the egoic self, you cannot eliminate thought patterns or emotional patterns which lead to unhappiness. I think there are only two ways to live. One is with affection and love, which is Maitri. The other is without it. We are social beings, as His Holiness constantly reminds us, so we have to relate to each other. There are only two ways of doing it. We do it in a sense of harmony and friendship, or we do it out of a sense of power. Power may be money power, it may be positional power, it may be political power, it may be coercive power, it may be strikes on Syria as we speak. or they give me love and affection, as His Holiness and Gandhi were always keen to point out. So I've been more than the vice president. I've probably been the president now. But this is not the presidential address, so my apologies both to the director as well as Dorji, both two directors here of Tibet House and my own institution. But please do get that gate opened. This house is testimony. Next time I'm going to ask Professor Thapan, next conclave with Dorji, right? She'll be here and I'm going to ask, is the gate open? Okay, so I've achieved something. I go back to my colleagues and they won't be very happy about this either, but I'll tell them that the gate is soon opening. Okay, now, great, wonderful. So, can we start with Professor Vivek?
Yes, certainly. Of course.
Rajik, and I'm being told 5 minutes each strictly, so that's my role, sir. So that will leave us a little time for discussion later. Yes? So,
Am I the first?
oh, if you like. But sir, please, you using the PowerPoint? Yes. I remember once inviting the PM in exile. What was his good name?
Yeah.
Samdong Rinpoche.
Samdong.
Yeah. And Nareshji was there at DU when he was there, and so was Meenakshi. And I asked him, do you have a PowerPoint presentation there? And he said, sir, I don't have the power, nor do I have any point to make. But if you'll permit me, I'd like to share a discussion. So there you are.
Thank you, Professor Suneza. It's it's a moment of pleasure for me to be here as a panelist with learned people like Professor Suneza and all the panelists. To start with, I'm really thankful to Tibet House and Center for Ethics and Values Ramanujan College for giving me the opportunity to share my views on this topic. So now what I have done is actually I have did some variation in the topic. The topic is basically introducing values and ethics in modern education. Our previous efforts are sufficient. So what I am doing is I have added two words, that is inclusion versus commercialization. In 21st century, and especially in the present time in Indian context, if one sees how education is going on and what way we are going, so certainly these two words makes sense in the present context. Now, before I go to this why education and why it should be ethical, actually there is a two-way relationship between the society and individual that we will have to understand to begin with. That is, how the society would depend on how and what kind of individuals it has. And at the same time, what would be the behavior and value system of an individual in a society would depend on what kind of society he or she is living. So it's a two-way thing. I mean, individual will determine what kind of society would be, and the society at the same time, so social values would determine what kind of individual the society is going to make. Okay, so why education? We all know that, I mean, education along with health and few others are social sector activities, and therefore has to be dealt in that perspective. Okay, and society education itself, we believe that will make people ethical and moral. But if certainly it has failed and have not made people, even being educated, if have not behaving morally and ethically, then there was some problem. That means the previous efforts for doing it have failed or have not been able to do it. I mean, I do it in a historical perspective. I mean, I'll just try to relate the historical perspective with the current scenario in terms of inclusion and commercialization. Okay, that is, today, my friends, today is an auspicious day for the country. As we all know, 14th February. 127th birth anniversary of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar we are celebrating in the country, and the government is very enthusiastic in celebrating this, the present government. And so I chose to actually take something from his Bombay Legislative Council address debate that was held on 12th March 1927, and see how relevant that his observations of Bombay constituency of 1927 today on 2018 after 1991 years. So see how he is giving data of Bombay constituency, that how much the government is spending per capita on education, and what is the per capita revenue in terms of excise duty at that time. And see, it was 14 annas per capita per person expenditure by the government in Bombay Presidency at that time, and the revenue was 2 rupees 17 paise per person. And why he has done it? I mean, this is what he is calling, sir, this is commercialization of education, and education is something that ought to be brought within the reach of everyone. So in 91 years from 1927, have we made education accessible to everyone in this country? I think we'll have to introspect, we'll have to think whether we have done this. And to deal with it, he says that education department is not a department which can be treated in the basis of quid pro quo. I mean, you'll have to deal with this department differently, because this is what is going to liberate and transform the individual as well as transform the society in future. Now, in the present context, see the last line, education ought to be cheapened in possible ways and to the greatest extent, possible extent. So what is happening in last few years, if you see the kind of fee revision that is taking place all across the universities and medical colleges and engineering, including IIM and all these places. Now, what is the present scenario? Sir, I'll just take maybe 1 or 1.5 minutes from now. What is the present scenario? In 2018-19 budget, the government of India have allocated 85,000 crore rupees for education, overall, all education from primary to higher education, from schools to colleges. And it is merely less than 4% more than what was the revised. I mean, I've given that data, you can see. So if I convert this into per capita expenditure, and given the total population, 50% or more than 50% population belongs to the age of up to 25 years in this country, and if I divide the whole amount by 50% of our population, it comes around 1,307 rupees. That is 1,307 rupees per person. And see the excise revenue. Excise revenue, I've taken the actual for 2016-17 presented in this budget. That was something around 3,82,094 rupees. And if I divide this by the whole population, it comes around 2,939. Situation is no different from what was basically in 1927 observed by Dr. Ambedkar. So, my friends,
sorry, can I just request that we conclude for the moment, but when we are back
sir,
in that session?
Just maybe 15-20 seconds. So, education being a social activity needs to be intervened by the government, and intervention not only in terms of merely increasing the expenditure on education, rather seeing whether measuring the outcome, seeing the outcome, okay, what kind of outcome that is coming from that, and making this process and system more inclusive for all the people in the country. Thank you, friends.
Thank you, Dr. Anita.
Okay, not only do I not have the power or the point, I don't even know whether I have any business being on this panel, but Geshe-la's kindness to invite me, and so I'll try and do my best. So how do we define ethics? I mean, according to the dictionary, Ethics or moral philosophy is a branch of philosophy that involves systematizing, defending, and recommending concepts of right and wrong conduct. The term ethics comes from the Greek word ethikos, and that comes from ethos, which means habit or custom. So ethics or moral values classically have been the domain of religion and religious teachers and places of worship. But now in modern times, with the numbers going to places of worship coming down and many of the religious leaders themselves not being icons of ethical behavior, it becomes empirical for us to teach ethics as a subject both in schools and in institutions of higher education and in a secular manner. So the foundation to good character or moral intelligence, today we've heard a lot about emotional intelligence, IQ and all that, but moral intelligence, that's a new kind of intelligence that has been identified, consists of 7 core virtues: empathy, conscience, self-control, respect, kindness, tolerance, and fairness. So the current school curriculum has done away with moral studies, and even in higher education, medical ethics, business ethics are not taught. And even if they are taught in some institutions, they are an optional subject. The Supreme Court in 2015 issued notice to the Center and the CBSE, one of our people who are in CBSE, who are representing CBSE, on a PIL seeking his direction to include moral science as a compulsory subject in the school curriculum. The bench headed by Chief Justice H.L. Dattu sought a response from the government on the issue raised by practicing advocate Santosh Singh. The state is under a constitutional obligation, she said, to endeavor to provide educational facilities which include moral values from primary education to secondary education. But the state has failed in its primary and vital task of making students good human beings and, in turn, good citizens. So now let me come to my own specialty of medicine. So in medicine, the Hippocrates oath that is held sacrosanct, and now the more secular kind of oath, and administered to all graduating physicians, becomes a mere ritual if it's not reinforced by regular classes on ethics throughout the medical education. This has led to a crisis in the practice of medicine. An unethical doctor is disastrous for the patient, we all know that. But they're also disastrous to themselves. In increasing numbers of cases, this leads to unhappiness, depression, and early burnout. Recognizing this, there was a conclave, a round table on ethical issues in the healthcare sector in India, held in one of the IIMs recently. And the think tank concentrated on the regulatory modes and methods as a way to curb widespread unethical practices. But they pointed out, strangely, they said the regulatory bodies themselves, and they said the Indian Medical Association, could not be held up as any icon of ethical behavior. So one of the panelists, Richard Manning, said that in his discussion of ethics should be grounded in the recognition that people will tend to act in ways that they perceive to be in their best interests. But while discussing best interests, he only spoke about economic interests. He didn't speak about well-being of the individual physician. He said if the salaries go up and if they start making more money, then they will be less likely to be unethical. But and also imagine a think tank on ethics, and they didn't speak about introducing ethics in medical education at all. So our own adage, prevention is better than cure, was completely not followed. As the Greek definition of ethics tells you, it's a habit. And habits are formed early during school years and college years. And education plays a huge role in fostering this habit. Definitely regulation, fear of losing one's reputation, all these things I agree play a role. But I deeply believe that the well-being of an individual, whether it's a physician or otherwise, that comes from ethical practice of either medicine or whatever you are doing, fostered by regular introspection, will go much, much longer in sustaining ethical behavior. The IMA has just released a statement 2 months ago saying the suicide rate among physicians is a public health crisis. The numbers are alarmingly high, and they have attributed this to long working hours, taxing medical training, violence against doctors, and the stress of saving lives. But it's incredible that they haven't spoken about the mental well-being of physicians. Where does that come in? So we can teach mindfulness practices to foster mental strength and resilience, but without a strong grounding base of ethics, there will be no long-lasting result. Just mindfulness will not give you the results without a strong base of ethics. So I end my presentation, hopefully on time, by saying that the need of the hour is to reintroduce ethics into our education system, both at school levels and at the higher education levels. And most definitely, our current efforts have clearly not been enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Anita. I think we already have some very valuable points being made. Professor Bibek pointed out, and today indeed is a very important day, the anniversary of Ambedkar, who was a fearless fighter for the most downtrodden of India, and pointing out that education gets a paltry budget in the Indian economy. And without that, how do we take it forward? And then Dr. Anita saying, well, what do we do with that budget once we have it? Is moral science taught at all anymore? And if so, how do we do it? And has the Hippocratic oath actually become the hypocrisy oath? Which often seems to be the case when you read what's happening in modern medicines and hospitals these days. So already some very valuable points, and to take those forward, Venerable Losang Tenpa.
Okay, otherwise known as Kabir.
Yes, my dear friend.
Thank you so much to Tibet House and Ramanujan College. So I'm a 62-year-old person who has 5 minutes to say a lot, so heaven help me, Buddha guide me. Thanks to Anitaji for giving me maybe 10 seconds extra. And what a wonderful coincidence we have a moderator with such a marvelous name. I hope you realize the appositeness of the name, Vivek Suneja. मतलब सुनते ही रहते हैं और he's very patient. Vivek, discrimination, so he is a discerning eternal listener. So
Makes for marital bliss.
huh? I would say Suneja Vivek Bhai. Anyway, so I want to ask first if you're all sitting comfortably. Are you comfortable? If you're not, sit comfortably. Don't torture yourself. We're already torturing ourselves enough in this world with our posture, our diet, our everything. So be comfortable and be happy.
Yeah.
And close your eyes for 15 seconds. I'm going to shut my mouth. You shut your eyes for 15 seconds. Check what comes in your mind. Thank you. I hope that was interesting, what came in your mind. I managed not to think about my favorite foods, but all sorts of things come into the mind, and it's the mind that we're working with, the thoughts, with the emotions. What is education? There are two ways of looking at it, educare or educare. Educare has more this sense of training or molding the mind, which could turn into brainwashing. Whereas educare is to lead out, draw out the potential wonderful qualities of a human being. So in Buddhism, of course, we speak of Buddha nature, which is at the moment trapped beneath a whole bunch of debris and conflicting emotions and useless thoughts and so forth. So to lead out that wonderful, pristine goodness, the basic goodness that we all have, that I think underlines everything that we speak about in at least, I think, the Eastern religions, especially Buddhism, when we talk about ethics. It only makes sense because we have this potential to be fully awake, fully compassionate, fully wise, fully courageous, all of these wonderful qualities that we need in our life. To draw that out. Whereas, let's face it, if we look historically at education, of course, Socrates was an amazing person. I would love to have lived at his time with my other friends, debating friends, Nareshji and all these people, Ajirji and Geshe-la. We would have been there with Socrates debating and, really having a good educational time. But since then it went downhill. And you could say since the Industrial Revolution that our dear British brothers and sisters introduced, mainly the brothers, I guess, it was downhill since then. Because what happened is you have to create a society where you are educating people to conform, to be ready to live in wretched conditions, work in wretched conditions from 9 to 5 without the benefit of 100 channels on TVs. That's what you had to educate people for, and it can't be called education. It's not drawing out the best qualities of a person, dumbing down the person so that they shut up, and nowadays we again dumb down, exhaust ourselves during the day. But of course, society can say, we're giving you entertainment at night. You have all these wonderful things you can look at on these screens. So this is, of course, a total travesty of education, which the great Krishnamurti has called a flowering in goodness. Education should be a flowering in goodness. Imagine in your mind your favorite flower, how it blooms. We should be like that. Students should be like that. Human beings should be like that. We should have work which we enjoy. We should have work which we can be passionate about. Let me read Krishnamurti before my time runs out. I'm not reading His Holiness because we take that for granted, and many other people have quoted His Holiness. So, it's a basic function of education to help you to find out what you really love to do, so that you can give your whole mind and heart to it, because that creates human dignity. That sweeps away mediocrity, the petty bourgeois mentality. That is why it's very important to have the right teachers, the right atmosphere, so that you'll grow up with the love which expresses itself in what you are doing. Without this love, your examinations, your knowledge, your capacities, your position and possessions are just ashes. They have no meaning. Without this love, your actions are going to bring more wars, more hatred, more mischief, and destruction. I think when I read Krishnamurti, if I was less of a emotionally deprived male, I would cry. He is so wonderful. His words are so amazing. He says, and this is the heart of, what Buddhism and all the great religions are probably saying. When I understand myself, he says, when I understand myself, I understand you. And out of that understanding comes love. Out of that understanding comes love, kindness, affection, the ability to put myself in your shoes. Actually, I'm not wearing shoes right now, but it's a nice carpet. I like to get the negative ions from the ground, although I don't know how many there are on a carpet. So, like that, my time has run out. But I would like to quote Baba Sahib Ambedkar, because I'm also very grateful to what he has given to this country, because nobody spoke about the farmers yet in this session, and tens of thousands of our brothers and sister farmers have committed suicide in this country. Can you believe it? The people who grow our food are committing suicide. And we don't care because, we're in a very nice environment. We have enough food. For us, food comes out of packets, doesn't come out of the topsoil, which is essential for our survival. Many of us haven't been to a village or ever dug the ground, so what would we know about that? Ambedkar, Baba Sahib says there is one question that every religion must answer. what mental and moral relief does it bring to the suppressed and the downtrodden? So this ethical education we're talking about, is it translatable into the villages? Or is it just for us, no, I won't say elitists, is it for us privileged people in the cities alone? Who is it for? Is it for the families of the people, the farmers who are committing suicide? For people who are being burnt to death? For the caste or the castelessness that people perceive them to have? What is it? Baba Sahib said we should not be like sheep. He said if we want to be good Buddhists, we can't be like sheep. He said Buddhism is difficult to understand. It requires proper thinking. Surely my time has run out, sir. I didn't mean it when I said you have to only listen.
Sir, at 62,
Why
your
you
time
give me
cannot
privilege?
run out. May you live long, sir.
Yeah. I think you better. I think
But
you should
maybe
stop
for the
me now.
time being, time has run
Yeah.
out.
So let's remember to flower in goodness, to not be self-forgetful, imitative, and artificial, like Aurobindo said we were already in 1909. He said that, and let us not forget Gandhiji, because many people here have mentioned heart, head, and heart. Lekin haath kahan gaye? What happened to the hands? Head, heart, what about hands? Are you willing to clean your own toilet? Are you willing to dig the ground? Are you willing to plant seeds? I'm not supposed to as a monk, but lay people can. You can do that. Where is our food coming from if you want to only use a computer and a keyboard? Who's going to plant the seeds? Is that part of an ethical, earth-oriented ethics or not? Gaia-oriented, earth-oriented, soil-oriented, ecology-oriented ethics. Come on. We're living on a planet which we are destroying. And that alone will answer the question that is this sub-panel has to answer, that have our previous efforts been enough in education? Kaddu, useless. Useless our efforts so far, mainly. I mean, I love kaddu, it's a good vegetable, but you know what I mean. So, I think I finished here. There are many other things, but we can keep it for the other things.
Thank you, sir. This business of time. When I was growing up, I'm probably the older generation remembers, the cricket matches used to be 6 days. There used to be a rest day in the middle.
Test.
It was a test match. Now we have 5 minutes each for a panel. And that too in Tibet House organized panels, where you warm up for days to meditate. I don't blame Doji at all. I mean, to get people here and get them to sit and listen. A lot of students are already absconding. They've done their parliament and the parliament is in recess. So the next time, maybe one minute each. At FMS, we're about to commence the interviews, and all students have to speak 1 minute extempore. We're supposed to judge people whether they're fit to become managers in 1 minute. That is where we're coming to. So I think the pace of modern living is something we need to really question. But I could have gone on listening to you forever, sir. But I guess you have to be 62 and a Buddhist monk to be able to compress that in whatever time you did. And here is another friend and a very wise person, Mr. Ajit.
Thank you. Antonella came and she was sitting on the board and she said that all the people in the dais are either doctor or venerable. You are only Mr. Why are you here? So I really don't know, but I would really like to thank to Geshe-la, whose direction came, though I feel a bit nervous because he always expects that the content should be quite rich and the expression should be precise. Maybe I may not be able to come to that expectation. All perfection is yours, Geshe-la, and all imperfection is mine. So having said that, I just want to come, what is the base we have talked about the education, we have talked about the ethics. I really would not like to go in the definitions. By this time, I think the things are a bit clear. Now, how many of you have heard the news about a month back? One of the top anchors in the South India, 43 years, quite well known, committed suicide.
Yep.
I think some of you have heard. You know, when the investigation team went, her suicide note, what was written in that? My mind is my enemy. Okay? That is what she has really put it. And on the other hand, I think some of you must have again heard, this is Miss Sinha, who went to the Mount Everest. She was the first handicapped person. And the story is terrible. She was traveling in in a train. She was putting on the chain. The rovers came, wanted to snatch. She resisted, and she was thrown out of the train. And at that particular time, one train came and overran her. And the whole night she was there. And she counted 49 trains moving that night over her. She was treated in the hospital in Bareilly, Lucknow, and finally she was brought to AIMS. She was there for 4 months. And after 4 months, she went not to her own home. She went to Bachendri Pal, who was the first woman mountaineer. And she said that with my amputated leg, I want to go to the Mount Everest and climb that. She felt surprised, but then she found that there was a very strong determination in her, and she was trained. She went to the Mount Everest, and she was the first lady with amputated leg who climbed, and she said that mine is my friend. Okay, so just look at the difference of the perspective in the mind. So why I'm bringing this, one has yielded to the mind and committed suicide, other one won over the mind and went to the Mount Everest. And she decided that she is going to conquer all the peaks in the world. She has already done Kilimanjaro, she has done in Europe, and I think she is now doing, or she has done, Australia. Why I'm really bringing these two cases, that when we are talking of the education, when the students are going, let us say, inside the school or the college or the university, what is the mindset with which they really come out? Do they have that strong determination? Do they have that will to do what they really want to do? I think if we put that in their mind, I think education, I really feel, would be very fruitful. Otherwise, it becomes what is called the paper chase. I don't know whether you have seen that movie called The Paper Chase. This was the Harvard University, the brilliant student who gets 93 marks, who gets a gold medal, but by the time he gets this degree, he gets so fed up with the academic excellence, he makes a kind of boat of his degree, the first class, goes to the Pacific Sea and sends it in the water. So do we really want that the student should be like that? So if we don't want, then what's the kind of mind with which the student should really come out? Though, of course, a lot of qualities have been really put, but I really would like to put one quality which should and which must be there, that is the mindfulness. I think unless it is there, neither the academic excellence nor the enlightenment would really come on the stable ground. And you know what is the mindful span of the people today? William James, who is considered the father of the psychology, he said that it is only 3 seconds. And the psychologists, they have recorded that in 24 hours, we have almost about 60,000 to 100,000 thoughts, and they are all mechanical, repetitive. We don't create any fresh thought. So it is only the ground of the mindfulness which can really make us sensitive to what is really going in our mind. And I think I agree with Father Matthew, who said that we need a kind of inner surveillance. We need a kind of inner CCTV so that we can really watch as what is really happening in our mind. So, do I have one?
Oh, absolutely, sir.
Yeah, okay. So I think the mindfulness, I really feel, should really become the base. And in one of the sutras of the Buddha, he said that the state of the mindfulness of the mind, it is peaceful, ambrosial. Just look at this word, the peaceful, ambrosial. Okay? And in that state, they said that there is no unwholesome act which can really be committed. So which essentially means we are not going to commit any unethical act in that state of mind. Now, with that state of mind, what do we do? How are we really going to do? It is like sharpening the knife. With that, what do we do? So similarly, when the mind is sharpened, this is to be used to find out what is the reality, what is the truth. As Buddha himself has said that, whatever I say, don't take it just mere out of the respect. Analyze it like a goldsmith cutting, rubbing, melting, and seeing the purity of the gold. So similarly, I think with that state of mind, I think the student should be really equipped to see and find out what the reality is, which essentially means that when they are leaving the gates of the school or the college or the university, they are coming out with a very open, inquiring mind. I think if that is coming, I'm very sure that the path on their life in the future would be very happy, and it would be making everyone around very, very happy. Because it is very clearly now tested that when there is the shift in the mental consciousness, there is the shift in the biology also. If the mind is happy, the body is happy. If the mind is unhappy, then the body is unhappy. I think His Holiness also gave the example to prove this. The pre-verbal stage, below the 6-month-old child, they were shown the cartoon. The cartoons are playing, they're very happy. All these small kids, non-verbal stage, they also become very happy. But when it was shown that those cartoons are really fighting, these people also become very agitated, very sad. So I think that's the kind of state of the mind we are really looking that the student should really have. And I would like to say that the mindfulness in the education makes a difference. And I would like to conclude by sharing one of the events to which I was also part. This was in Delhi in the Sanskrit school. Thich Nhat Hanh's team came. This was in 2008, and I was part of that. So we have a group sharing. One of the teacher from one of the best school in Delhi, she said that the parents of one of the students came and told that their child was not feeling very comfortable in her class. She was a bit surprised why it is really so. She felt that everything was okay. So she said that, okay, she would find out. So the next morning, she called the child and she said that she spent 20 minutes with the child and asking what, how, and she didn't interfere also. It was all mindful listening. And after 20 minutes, she came to this finding that the child was feeling that the teacher was not really paying attention to him. So next morning onwards, whenever she used to meet the child, ask, okay, how are you? Good morning, just patting. And after 6 months, she found that this boy who was not doing well in the subject that she was teaching, did a miraculous performance. And she came to this understanding that in case the child is not doing well, in case the child is not liking the teacher, the child will not like the subject which the teacher is teaching. I think that's a very perceptive observation. So it's a kind of challenge to the students, to the teachers also, that why the student is not doing well. And another, this was again in 2012, again the team came, we had a workshop, this was in Lady Shriram. The principal of the DAV school, who had 3,000 students, she said that she opened a room, it's called, I think, the breathing room or the mindful room. The two of the teachers were specifically trained. And any student, any teacher, any employee having some problem could go to that room and talk to these trained people. And she said that the result was remarkable. Some of the students who were antisocial, when they were put through this process, they were all in tears because they got so moved, because here are the people who can really support to them. So even for making someone ethical, I think the mindfulness really plays a wonderful role. So I think Suneja is looking towards me. I'll conclude by one event to which I was also part. This was again in 2008 when Thich Nhat Hanh came. 8 days we were on the pilgrimage to Bodh Gaya, Rajgir. When we were in Rajgir, we were staying in the ordnance factories. And this is, of course, a restricted area. And everyone has to write in the register, 300 of us. Thich Nhat Hanh also had to write. He wrote his name, everything, telephone number, and finally, when it came to the address, he put it here and now. So I think the whole purpose or the whole education, in case really bring the mind of the students to here and now, I really feel that would really be the fruition of the efforts of the education system. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ajirji. Two wonderful stories. One where the mind is the enemy, the other where the mind is befriended. And I think the Dhampada begins, the opening statement of Dhampada is the mind is a forerunner of everything. And if the mind is in a positive state, happiness follows you like a shadow. And if the mind is in an unwholesome state, unhappiness follows you like a shadow. But 30,000 to 60,000 mechanical, repetitive thoughts. That's amazing. So unless we are mindful, there is no question of being peaceful, and therefore there is no question really of being in a state where one can be ethical and wholesome. So thank you, sir. I think His Holiness and the Tibet House must be credited for producing people like these who are on both sides of my who are capable of distilling wisdom into 5 to 7 minutes. And I think His Holiness and the Tibet House must be congratulated. And now may I turn to... Okay. All right. Okay, sure. Absolutely. Please. Yeah, Dr. Parashar.
Sir, again, I have a PowerPoint presentation, but I don't have any power, but I want to make a point. You all must have been going through the newspaper a lot about the leaks, a leak of all kinds, and leak of question papers. And you will be amazed to know the lady, the person who has leaked that question paper of CBSE was promised to be the principal of the school. That's why he was leaking that paper for someone. He has that kind of interest. So we teacher need to introspect what kind of education system we are living. So I want to make a point regarding the teachers. I have prepared something. I am a student of economics, so will using some framework of economics. That's why I've written something about the erosion of the higher. Okay, without wasting my time, because I also have 5 minutes. First of all, I express my sincere gratitude to the organizers to give me the wonderful opportunity to be the part of this esteemed panel. Really, I'm just enjoying it. I express my highest regard to Professor Vivek Suneja, the chairperson portion of this discussion, with whom I had a very brief interaction, sir. I was a fellow in ILLL, and you were Pro-Vice Chancellor of Delhi University at that time. So the topic is the erosion of ethics in higher education. We in economics always talk about the optimization and maximization, not only of the profit, but also of the welfare of the society. But somehow economics fails to account for unethical behavior of the participating entities while building these models. However, being a student of economics, I am tempted to revisit available theoretical framework in economics to analyze the erosion of universal ethics in higher education. Given the limited time, I will highlight the most celebrated work done by two great economists, G. Hardin and John Nash. Hardin's classic piece, The Tragedy of Commons, exhibits how individual users acting independently pursue their own self-interest contrary to the common good of all the users, and thereby spoiling the resources through their collective actions. Although this concept mainly utilized to explain the usage of natural resources, however, I strongly believe this tragedy of common is being manifested in the tragedy of education as an art. Here, art being the acronyms for appointment, research, and teaching. While appointing a teacher or an educational administrative officer, appointing authority mainly guided by self-interest, and those self-interests can be of various type, political, and also most of us, our teachers, must be knowing what kind of interests are there. Mainly guided by the self-interest, less than deserving candidate, which is contrary to the common good of users of education, which is student, colleagues, and institution, and thereby spoiling the resources that is education. Tragedy is that most of the appointing authorities are guided by self-interest, and their collective action has damaged the higher education. Similarly, research and teaching has been affected by this short-sighted selection process. To highlight why research publication create a situation which promote unethical win-win situation, I will use the framework of game theory with a very simple model that's known as prisoner's dilemma. The payoff matrix will establish that the Nash equilibrium will be a situation when both the participants indulge in unethical research publication. You can see the green lines. Both of them are tempted to go for unethical education because that is their best strategy. That is their given the scenario. Nash equilibrium postulates that each player should adopt what is best for him or her, given that other competitor will also be doing that, what is good for him or her. Hence, Nash equilibrium will be unethical publication. Now, what is the solution? G. Hardin suggested, while explaining the tragedy of commons, suggested fencing or barricading of area to prevent the loss of common property. Hence, we need to barricade the education sector from the people who are using it for their individual interest and thereby damaging the common goods. Madam raised the same question about the doctors. I'm raising the same question about teachers. How can this be done? We all need to ponder over this. This is not a simple question. For me, it would be possible only when honest and ethical people will be managing the state of affairs in education. Solution lies at heart. They'll say, you will have to be honest and ethical. I've converted this art, that is tragedy of education, to the joy of heart, and heart being the honest, ethical appointment, ethical and honest publication, and teaching in a honest and ethical manner in the classroom will create, I think, joy of honesty. Hard. For Nashik-Lund, either we will have to change the rule of the game or we will have to change the players. Either you will have to change the rule of the game. And Dr. Sharma who is a wonderful person. I heard him when I was attending a MOOCs workshop over there. This API business has damaged the education system. So either you will have to change the rule of the game or the players itself. The players coming to the market, to the system, are not behaving in the ethical manner. And this is a major concern. I feel very bad when teachers are not taking their classes the way they should take. And it is very unfortunate. I'm getting a bit emotional. It is very unfortunate that we will have to discuss that ethics in education itself being a noble profession, it should be a kind of very serious question for all of us who are engaged in this business of education. So some questions are difficult to answer because these simple questions are made difficult by complex people. We need to have an emotional attachment with the system of higher education, and we'll have to protect it with our heart and soul. Thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Parashar. I'm glad you talked about economics, because I think in the modern age, the modern priests are the economists. They're not the people from religion or spirituality or from psychology. Economics rules. And that is why the Delhi School of Economics is so critical. And I hope, ma'am, I'm not talking about the gate. Last time I pulled a leg and we've had a bit of a feud. So my apologies, I'm not doing that. But I hope, I think this is an invaluable opportunity. Meenakshi and I and Roji and His Holiness, we worked so hard over the years to bring Krishnamurti and His Holiness to Delhi University. And I think now that you are in the Delhi School of Economics, that the Delhi School of Economics will realize that economics is a social discipline. It needs to engage with sociology. It needs to engage with geography. It needs to engage with FMS, which used to be part of Delhi School of Economics, and it should have a moral compass. It's not about consumption and production where we maximize the individual self-interest. Professor Dr. Parashar was talking about the prisoner's dilemma. I don't know how many of you are aware of the prisoner's dilemma. It's a very simple game. It says you can cooperate or you can non-cooperate. Your other player, the opponent, can cooperate or non-cooperate. Now, if both cooperate, you get a certain level of outcome. Say, maybe you get 5 units each, 5 rupees each, right? But if both of you non-cooperate, yes, then you say get 1 unit each. Okay, so cooperation 5 units each, non-cooperation 1 unit each. But suppose the other fellow cooperates and I don't, then I exploit the other guy. He gets 0 and I get 10, and vice versa. So now we have a situation where you think that, look, is he going to cooperate or not? Because if he doesn't cooperate and I cooperate, I'm going to get exploited. So there's fear. On the other hand, if he is going to cooperate, now I have the temptation to be greedy, because I can exploit the other guy. I want to have 10. So both people end up non-cooperating. It's like traffic lights go off, yes, which happen all the time in Delhi. So now you can cooperate, which means make way for each other, and then the traffic can keep flowing because you mutually adjust. Or you say, look, I don't trust the other guy will stop. So I'm going to just keep waiting. I am fearful. So let me make my way. The other guy can also think like that. But now also, if he is going to stop, let me exploit. And what is the final solution? Both of them non-cooperate. That's the tragedy of the commons, which means you end up with what you have in traffic, what you have in the Indian banking system, what you have in the judiciary, in teaching, bureaucracy. It's a defect problem. Now, what drives it? Only two things: greed and fear. The fear that the other guy is greedy. So what are the poisons that Buddhism talks about? It's greed. Eliminate greed, then you eliminate the fear that the other guy is greedy, and then you have corporate. Your traffic works fine, your educational institution works fine, your courts work fine, everything works fine, there is joy. Ultimately, it's all about ethics. Without ethics, neither are banks, nor are institutions, nor are traffic. Nothing can work. And that is why I congratulate David House for bringing this here. Without this, our country cannot go on. Pick up the morning papers. See what's happening. Our country now is facing the abyss. What's happened to those two girls is not a matter of a civilized country. Forget your 5,000 years of civilization. We are an uncivilized, barbaric nation as we stand today. Let's face it. It's like Germany facing what they did in the Holocaust. I think we're doing it to our own people. And if we don't take note, God help us all. So with that, can I turn to Dr. Siddiqui to enlighten us, please?
Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to first thank the organizers for giving me an opportunity to share my views. And I think a lot has already been said, so I just want to give a little idea of how we are practically implementing these things. Ethics, everybody has talked about. I don't want to get into details of that. I would just like to say that ethics, they should be taught. It's very necessary to teach them, but they should not be taught in the language of do's and don'ts as prescriptions. They have to be taught, I wouldn't say taught, individuals have to be motivated. They have to be given principles or propositions and help them to apply them in their daily life. That's the way people are going to imbibe ethics. The reason why ethics, moral education has been in our system for quite some time. For a little few years it has been removed, but in schools moral education has been there. But it has been in the language of do's and don'ts. And we have to first of all stop that, and we have to motivate our students or individuals like ourselves. It's not that something only students require. Every one of us requires ethics. And as regards education, that is the way forward. It can be two types. It can be formal educations in schools or informal educations at the adult level, whether it is in schools or colleges, because as such, ethical education, there are two ways to go about it. One is you infuse it in a subject, whether it's science or social science or GK. That's one way to teach it. And as we are also publishers by profession, for the last 15 years, we have been infusing positive ethical education in subjects. It has got some response, but we felt that it is more important to integrate it as a curriculum. NCERT, CBSE has not, they have initiated many things, but nothing has been crystallized. So as a publication, Navdeep Publications, we have initiated the curriculum. In fact, this year our books from 1 to 8th will be ready, and next year 9 to 12th will be ready. And we have also initiated this as the Culture of Peace program for institutions and corporates, which we have initiated in Ramanujan College. Some of the participants are here. It's a 3-month program, and because we are not going to get many people immediately available in classroom setting, so we are developing it as social media platforms or online platforms where we share it with people. And in the result of which we are trying is that, first of all, we try to change the individual at the level of the mind. A lot has been talked about mindfulness. It is at the level of the mind that everything is done. Science has already proved that. So we have to get a positive attitude in people. And I would just like to end by saying there is a quote that two men looked outside the same prison bars. One saw the mud and the other the stars. So we have to educate ourselves and our children to be able to have a positive mindset. So we look at the positive in ourselves, in others, and most importantly, we tell them this is not something that you're just doing for others. It is only by being positive yourself, being helping to others. It is said in giving we receive. By helping others, only then we're going to get something in return. And the crux of the whole thing is that we have to, education is not enough. In ethical education not enough has been done, but we have to not wait for others to do. We just have to stand and try to do something ourselves. And that's what we're trying to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mud and stars. Buddha nature, or just the muddy mind? In giving, we receive. In economics, I mean, that for an economist, that's crazy. In giving, we receive. I mean, Adam Smith has told us that our self-interest is what makes the world go round, and of course, he was a god. He is our god. So, I think that's really worth thinking about. Now, we are already transgressing in terms of time, so I'm going to ask the only person who can possibly give us mercy on that account. How much time can we take? 5 minutes? Doji? No, we are transgressing. So, sorry, shall we have a little discussion? I know. So maybe just 5 minutes, sir, with your permission. Is that okay? Yes. Shall we take just a couple of questions in the house in that case? Yes, sir. But not comments. Specific questions for the panel. Please. Go on, sir. Would you like to ask something? Yes. We can hear you. So.
Yeah.
Yes, you're audible.
So we have talked about mind, happiness, education, ethics. I'm making a very strong statement. We are living in a country where 90% people are unethical, 95% people are unethical. And what is education? We have talked about it, like somebody has a degree in college, university. We always feel that education. Education doesn't mean people to know what is good. No. It means teaching them to aim at the market, and most of the people don't know how to treat. Number one. Number two, the main problem we have in this country, we don't treat others the way we treat ourselves. That means we are not educated. Thank you.
Okay. So, any question? Would the panel like to just pick up any threads that you may want to? Yes.
So my question is that ethics only comes out when we know that the person is not ethical. Otherwise, when the person is ethical, there is very little for the participants to know that the person is ethical. So how do we encourage? Is it an interesting case? I think from the Nicholas Nassim Taleb books, which is a Food by Randomness, which also, sorry to say, economics as a charlatans, which capital C, by the way. And interestingly, this is what the proposition is, that how do we figure out that, how do we propose? Do we give an award that you being an ethical person? Because the ethics only comes out when you are not ethical.
I'll take a little stab at that because having criticized economists so much, I must own up to be an economist. I'm an economist by background. And how do we know what is ethical, what is not ethical? Anything that is conducive to genuine happiness for us and others is ethical. In fact, in India, In Sanskrit, the term for ethics is sheel. That's why we say a sheel person is someone who's unethical, and sheel is someone who's ethical. In fact, it was Naresh Mathur who first told me that the word sheel has the same roots as sheetal. And sheetal, what does sheetal mean? Cool. Ethics are cool. And why are ethics cool? Because if you're angry, if you're jealous, then your body temperature goes up, your heartbeat goes up. If you're full of frustrated desire, again, you have peptic ulcers and your temperature goes up. And therefore the body, in a sense, tells you that this is not cool, this is not conducive to happiness. So Sheel and Sheetal, ethics are cool. Every car in Delhi on its windscreen these days has this title, chill. Have you seen that? Chill, chill. Which means if you touch me or come close to me, by night you'll be on an ice slab. So, please.
Your question, why should an award come from outside for an ethical person? The feeling of well-being that you get from, being an ethical person in your particular profession, the lack of nightmares that you have because someone might come after you because of your not being ethical, that itself is reward. So it doesn't necessarily have to be acknowledged by someone else outside or for others to say, oh, this person's really ethical. It really is from within that the feel-good factor should, make you ethical. As Dr. Suneja has been quoting the Buddha, he also said the same thing. The Buddha said, if someone knew how wonderful it felt to give, then no one would keep anything, they would keep giving. So similarly, I'm going to paraphrase that and say, if someone knew how wonderful it felt to be ethical and to work in this way, then they would never do anything unethical.
Gandhi's book is called My Experiments with Truth.
What is the ignorance?
My Experiments with Truth. Yes. Which means, like a scientist, you need to play around and be sensitive and see what leads to what. And that's intelligence. And some people don't even get to try. They have been so conditioned, they think that's the only way to go forward. I remember Meenakshi and I, if you remember Meenakshi, we had done a Krishnamurti conference with one of the college groups back at the conference center, a 2-day discussion on Krishnamurti. And when the students started, and we have Krishnamurti from Kabir here, and when we started the discussion, I remember people couldn't make head or tail out of it. And then the students worked on it for 2 days, and Meenakshi was at them with all her PhD students. And by the end of 2 days, having experimented on all that, I remember there's suddenly a moment of wow and aha. And they were happy, and they went back happy. They went back happy. And I don't think anybody other than Professor Meenakshi Thapar has had those experiments. No, honestly, in a place where Delhi School of Sociology, where the colleagues think, what is all this about? I mean, she has had the courage to put these things up, and sometimes I know some of our colleagues who said, what is all this about? And she said, well, this is right, we must experiment with it. And people have responded. So I think you're right. Ignorance means that. Ignorance means not trying, not being entrepreneurial enough, not being a risk taker, to live comfortable lives, not happy lives. So, no. Just a mic for my friend and mentor. जय श्री देव जी.
Okay. In fact, I like to pick the question up from the gentleman over there. This is a very serious question because this is not to be taken lightly. The universal ethics which you're talking about. So the question is the game which the Professor Parashar and Professor Wilson very clearly indicated. The question is that in the ancient classical Indian tradition, so the ethics, because of the God-fearing, this God-fearing concept that make the people to engage in the ethics. This is one way. Another one is, likewise in the West, God-fearing. And then in those traditions where there is no concept of God, still there is the base for the ethics, which is the law of karma. Because of the law of karma, I should be behaving ethically too. Now the question arises, this is universal ethics, ethics to be embraced by all, by everyone, whether you believe or whether you don't believe in any religion. So there the question arises, what would be that force which would make the people be convinced that we should behave ethically? What should that force be? This is the question. So oftentimes people, what we do is that we look for some incentives or rewards. Okay, well, if I get this, then I'll do it. If I don't get it, then why should I do it? This is the question that is the human psyche. So the question is, what would be that thing which would make people be convinced that universal ethics is something everybody has to embrace? One question. Once people are convinced, only then what ethics to be embraced? What are the values to be embraced? This second question. So the first question is a very serious question. And for this, there's the response given by His Holiness in the form of 3 points. His Holiness says that to be something universally accepted, it should include something which universally has the basis. One is a common sense. Common sense, how by being ethical, you will be what you seek is happiness. This all come through by sharing with others with the feeling of love and affection, and then the common experience within yourself. That with the feeling of love and affection towards others, you feel the maximum happiness, just as you experience this greatest happiness when you are very young, so tender, vulnerable, and yet with your mother, the love of the mother. Number 2. Number 3, His Holiness says that it should be purely from the point of view of the scientific researches, scientific findings, that with the feeling of love and affection, then the body growth, brain development, immune system, they will all boost with the feeling of love and affection. So this feeling of love and affection, that should be the crux, gaining the experience of which you will feel that you gain the maximum benefit, so that everybody appreciates. This should be the ground for the universal ethics. This is what His Holiness says. So therefore this question is very important as to why what is that thing which would make people universally accepting this, that we should embrace ethics? What is that thing besides the God-fearing, besides the law of karma fearing? What else is there which everybody will see as a basis for accepting universal ethics? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, now.
We're talking about economics. I would like to give a very different view from what you said, sir. It's very true, God-fearing, karma, feeling good, that's motivation to be ethical. But what we have found in practical and in research, that self-interest motivates being ethical to a large extent. It might look very odd, but psychologically, we have the ego and the conscience in everybody. And in society, if we want to do anything, we need help from others. We cannot independently do anything. So when we are acting in a certain manner, then if we are touching the ego of the other person, then the other person we are evoking negativity from that person. He or she is not going to come to our help in any way. In fact, they're going to seek revenge. They're going to figure out ways to get after us or at least avoid us. But when we touch the conscience of a person, then that person is motivated to come to our help. And this is not something theoretically I'm saying. Practically, we, in our programs, in our books, when we explain this to people and they practically try it in life, it makes a difference. And then you are successful one time, then you are motivated to be positively ethical in the next time. And it's a way which you experience the benefits of being ethical. So self-interest motivates us to be ethical. That is something that we should understand. Though it might look very odd.
But I think, Dr. Nagma, you're saying exactly what Venerable Geshe said, except self-interest is not about egoic self-interest, it's about being happy.
Yes.
And you cannot be happy if you deal ego to ego. And that is precisely what Doji has been saying. That's what Buddhism says when it says no self, anatma. And that is exactly what you said. So just the words are different. I've just got this note and I don't need to read this out, do I? No. So thank you very much. Thank you everybody for all the panelists to be here, and thank you all. And my apologies to Professor Thapan, and I am publicly praying that she forgives me.
I would like to thank everyone in the panel. Please be seated for 2 minutes. Yeah, now may I request Keshadoji Ramdullah to honor chairperson and the panelists with the khata and a souvenir. Professor Vivek Suneja ji. Dr. Anita Dudani ji. Wen Kabir Saxena ji. Mr. Ajir Vidya ji. Professor Vivek Rajak ji. Dr. J. Kishan Parishar ji. Thank you. And Professor Nakma Siddiqui ji, I'm sorry. Next session is a special lecture on the ethical context of learning.
Hello everyone. We are now left with the last session. Last but not the least, we are honored to have our chief guest, Professor Girishwar Mishra, who was not able to come during the inaugural session. We will now have his special lecture on the ethical context of learning. May I request Sir to please take your seat on the dais. And may I also request Professor T.K. Mishra to honor him with khata and a souvenir. Thank you, Dr. G.K. Mishra ji, and thank you, Professor Girishwar Mishra, for taking your time to participate in this conclave. And now may I request sir to proceed with his lecture.
Welcome you, sir. It's wonderful to have you here, and I would personally request Director Tibet House Damdul ji to please come over the stage. Please share a stage with us. And briefly, let me give you some information about the session we had. We began our discussion at a very positive note, having, a teacher of Mr. Damdul giving a keynote address, a wonderful gesture. And we are closing with a similar gesture by having Girishwar Mishra ji, my Guruji. So, I mean, morning session and evening session both have been matched. Okay? And I'm really very delighted. Sir, briefly let me tell you that though we had several people, eminent people speaking and sharing views and everything, and the most important part was that we had 1.5 hour ethics parliament here, and we have been so successful together, me, our organization, Ramanujan College and Tibet House, in sensitizing the youth with ethics and values. They were here and they discussed everything, and they came out with a resolution that this is essential part of our education and it must be added to our curriculum, not as a part of syllabus but through activity learning. So it was a matter of great joy for us that the voice which we keep telling them is coming from the youth's voice, okay? And they were fully convinced. Rather, we were so happy that their presentation was a bit better than what we had given. So that was a great achievement. And one thing was there that some people raised, apprehension about the utility of ethics and values in future because it is coming down. But you would agree with me that Mr. Deepak Chopra, legend in the field of spirituality, he divided the development process in 4 eras. And the first era was product era, where those who used to have product, they used to have command, they used to command power. Then came the marketing era. Those who were able to market their product, they used to command power. Third era was the era where they had information. Those who had information, they commanded power. Fourth era was knowledge. Knowledge era, I mean, information has to be converted into knowledge. So in the world, those who had knowledge, they used to command power. Now the future era, since the knowledge has reached a saturation level, but just by pressing a button, I can blast White House. Saturation level, science and technology has reached. So the next era is going to be the wisdom-based knowledge. Those who would be having wisdom, those who would be having ethics, they would be commanding power. So let us not undermine the power, the strength of ethical values. The future is going to be guided by those norms only. Otherwise, there would be total destruction, nothing else. I don't want to stay between me and the legend, another legend, Professor Girishwar Mishra. He represents the traditional guru in true sense, which we have, somehow we have forgotten those values. We have to restore those values if we want to reclaim our position, restore our position in the society. So I'm really very delighted. This is the great success on the part of the entire organizers that he has been able to make it. And today in the morning, he was having a very important meeting in the cabinet. Cabinet minister had called him, so he couldn't make it in the morning, but he has somehow made it today. And we are looking forward for some concrete message from him. But let me tell you, whatever he will say, he has, I defined ethics, that ethicists live the truths. He has been living the truths. And from his mouth, if we get something, that is indeed very valuable for all of us. Thank you. Welcome, Professor Mishra.
Thank you, Tusharji, for beautiful words. I see here many friendly faces, and I'm delighted to learn that during the deliberations, many important things have emerged. When I came here, the session was on, and I could listen to 3 speakers plus comments. I assume that the issue is very urgent. Urgent in the sense that we are living in an age where the various bases or foundations of human life are being encroached, I would like to use this phrase, by forces which are against life. Somehow or other, this is happening. Professor Mishra asked me to focus on education, and I thought that I would like to bring home a few ideas pertaining to the ethical context of learning. Abhidhamma states, Mano Pubbangama Dhamma. Everything starts in your mind. And this mind is also the focus of Yoga Sutra when they say that, well, you need to clean it. There are many, many ideas which are coming from environment, and the locus of control is moving from inside to outside. The autonomy, the freedom that one should have is being encroached. So you have many sources. So there is a tension between your existential reality and the context in which you are living. And I was fortunate to read this book earlier, and it beautifully brings out a few things which are very crucial and very clear. And that also provides a basis for situating learning. His Holiness makes it very clear, and the point was also emphasized a few minutes back by my friend, that the foundation of life lies in relationships, in relating to others, in relating to your context, in relating to your environment. And relating means taking care of. Care and responsibility. they are present in maintaining life. A mother takes care. A mother has an approach with responsibility towards the child. That's why we are here. So the foundation of life clearly shows that it is this relationship, it is something which is joint, something which is reciprocal, something where both parties are involved. One has to recognize the other person, and we had to recognize your own self. I think this partitioning between self and other is very critical. We had some discussion on economics and self-interest, which is becoming so central and seems to be a very important problem. And we had a view that perhaps that may be of some help in regulating our life. There was one view. But I think this kind of partitioning where the individual self is considered to be totally independent, with very separate kind of boundary, a very different kind of entity, different from what is outside the self. And the boundary is not porous. Nothing can come out of this, nothing can enter into this. This was one kind of view, but here in the Indian context, many traditions, many religions, they often assume that the entity within that boundary called self and which is not within self comprises of same kind of elements. The 5 basic Panch Mahabhutas, they constitute you as well as the environment. At a conceptual level, the sattvic, rajasic and tamasic is individual property as well as what you eat is also of tamasic or rajasic or sattvic kind. So there is some kind of understanding that we are not very different from other things, other individuals. We need to find out that similarity which brings us close to others. You know, I'm a student of psychology, and one of the most important things that we learn and teach is individual differences. We teach that personality is something unique and unique and unique, it's you only. So, the whole learning is in that direction, that you are different. And you have to realize that uniqueness. While Indian thinking emphasizes that you are not so different. You share certain things with others also. Even non-living things are everything. So there is some kind of common platform which you share. Your characteristics and characteristics of other things. Now that provides a basis why you take care of the other person. It means it is not taking care of the other but taking care of yourself. The self is so inclusive. In other words, if you go to Vedanta and when you say, well, everything is Brahman and you are also Brahman and you are also Brahman, I think the whole idea is that of sharing. That existence is one. You need to recognize it. So, one lesson that I figure out is that creating the possibility of sharing is because you belong to the same thing. Your identity is similar. You are not very different. This is very important. All of us are human beings, but everybody is so different. Yes, we are different in certain ways, but we need to talk about what are the similarities. Second point is this individuality has become so central that even we derive group functioning also on the basis of individual functioning. Individual is something where we reduce everything. We bother so much about this, we don't go beyond that. This is one problem and one possibility. So how to promote this kind of sharing? And an identity where everybody finds that, well, I also belong to it. When we call Indian, everybody is Indian who is present in this room. Fine. So that Indianness is something which is shared by everybody. Humanity is something which we share with everybody. But that similarity has been de-emphasized and individuality has been too much, just contrary to that. So everybody has to realize himself or herself in terms of some unique characteristic, a set of characteristics, and you have to do that. And we de-recognize the similarity, the identity which is also there. Now, the entire learning process is something which is again treated as an individual affair. We find so many cases where students go for suicide because they have not earned the level of achievement that they desired or their parents desired or whatnot. In today's newspaper, there was one case of suicide in IIT Delhi. IITs have the finest brain. They select after intense competition, and a student goes there. If you go to even medical institutes, there is a lot of tension and mental health problems among doctors. So this individuality is not serving the purpose. This self-centeredness is going against your health, your well-being. This is another fact which is coming up. There is a lot of data to support the view that economic development and well-being and life satisfaction, they don't go together. To a certain extent they go, but economic growth increases. It is something like this. Your mental health and well-being is like this, and your economic growth is going up. That is the situation. So economics is not going to answer the problems of well-being and health. It's the issue of recognizing your own self in true sense, who you are. You need to redefine yourself. I think that is one big challenge, and that is missing. Some or other we need to bring in whatever term you want to use, whether it is consciousness or identity or self, you need to talk about it. One has to de-center. It's not you are the center of everything. It's very important. All the methods of yoga, including bhakti and all, they emphasize this thing, that you are not everything. You are not the center of this world. So, this kind of orientation, which has been established in learning environments, is going against the self itself. Now, what can be done? This is a very important question. How learning can be utilized to create this possibility of redefining self, going above your limited self and moving to a higher level of self, maybe a small self and, S with capital and S with the small s. One has to find out ways, the modalities where this happens. Unfortunately, the pattern of admission, pattern of learning, pattern of evaluation, all of them go against this. There is very little joint activity in the school or at postgraduate level. I think one of the important things about learning is that learning will change you as a person. It is not that you are a pot and some material has been put into you. You are a changed person. When you learn, then you are a different person. So, the practice of learning, perhaps, the involvement of teachers, how learning can be made so interesting, so enjoyable, that you have experience of creativity, you have experience of authorship, you have experience of doing something meaningful and relevant. It's very unfortunate that the kind of system that we have created. Take one example. Most of the exams are moving towards a system called using multiple choice questions. So you have 4 answers. That's all. That's the whole world. You have to mug up. And maybe at least one answer is correct. See, 4 persons put 4 different answers, one will be correct. I don't know, but we are in a mess. The evaluation, similarly the learning process, where close interaction and it's unfortunate that learning is something which is just contrary to creativity. Teachers come and they will say that, well, these are 4 points, 2 points were clarified in the last class, these 2 are remaining, this is the 3rd point, this is 4th point, course is complete. The framework is that course has to be completed. So the mindset is very different. It is not the desired change which we want in the student. It's not the modification in the understanding of the child. You see, it is important that when you have learned, you are a different person. Bodhisattva, if you have learned something, if you have acquired something, you are a different guy. Now this emphasis is reduced to, learning a few points. So I think there is a serious need to reorganize learning process where active learning, where involvement of teachers and students, maybe it's a joint activity, and there are some experiments we have been talking about here. There are many others also. Recently at Wardha, where I work these days, we organized a seminar where the alternative ways of teaching, the various kinds of schools and experiments which are taking place, what are the good things which they have and how they can be incorporated. We need to look at that. That is something very, very important. Another important thing which I would like to mention, there are many things which can be talked about, but I would like to know the self and identity issue is very, very crucial. The context of learning which goes against creativity and self-modification and self-understanding. And third is that our entire approach to education has become more and more intellectual, cognitive, rather than emotional, rather than affective. We hardly attend to the process of affect. There is sufficient data, and as Vivekji was pointing out about His Holiness' visit to Delhi University, in one of the meetings, Richard, he came from Wisconsin, and he showed sufficient evidence, and studies are going on, that with meditation, there is certain structural change in brain. It's something you think and you change yourself. You act in certain ways and you change. If you are helping someone, something is coming in your brain, there is some kind of a chemical release and it may change you. Or if you are very angry, again some kind of chemical change is taking place. So the emotional life is also correlated with your physiology, your neural activity, your body system. Try to remain happy for whole one day and see how is your blood pressure and how are the parameters of your physiological functioning. It's very important. When you talk about happiness, people will say, oh, it's just talk. But if you are happy and then see how things are happening, I think we have to change the mindset. Actually, we consider all these things as very soft. So, but the scientific approach is very objective and they want hard things. Tablets. There is no tablet for happiness. There is no tablet for learning. Abhi nahi kuch hua hai. We don't have any understanding of memory. There are many hypotheses that some kind of release is there, but it's not very clear. So my point is that the ecology of behavior, the ecology of action has to be reorganized. We need to create some kind of model where the practice of learning is supported by affective processes. The teachers have to be trained. They need to, experience that. If their mind is functioning well, if they are attending to the affective aspect of learning, perhaps they will help in bringing those qualities. Our learning environment is quite complex. From lower KG to master's level or what, not even PhD programs. I don't know there is any specific solution which will help everything. The only possibility is that if teachers, if parents learn about the possibilities that this can also happen. The potential that we have, a child from very poor environment. What about Dhoni? He has so much money, all the resources, and he came from hardly, he was not high school. So we need to also, expand the scope of learning. That learning may be, I think the gentleman, the Howard Gardner talks about many kinds of intelligence. It's not only the IQ, it's not only the EQ. If Hari Prasad Chaurasia may not be knowing any English, but he is great, superb. He is highly intelligent. And similarly, the martial art young kids from village, they are also very intelligent. So we need to rethink about the kinds of functioning and excellence that is possible. Why everybody should have high school, intermediate, BA, MA, PhD and whatnot? Once you are in, and you should continue for so many years. I think this is a genuine issue that we must see, because you can't create good institutions across India There are very few good institutions and large number of bad institutions. There are, I think, about 700 or so universities in India. You can't afford to have so many universities. But do anything and call it university, that's the situation. At a policy level, that is other struggle that has to be fought. But within the school system, I think some initiative can be taken in terms of training teachers, reorganizing the school environment, and empowering the learning process, where learning is not opposed to creativity. My granddaughter, she is just 5 or 6 years old. She is now in grade 2. She was in grade 1 and the teacher asked to write 3 words or so in Hindi sentences. We speak Hindi and she also loves Hindi. She wrote 6 words, good sentence, long sentence. That was not correct. We asked only 3 or 4 words. That's the problem. So the teachers have to be sensitized. I think we need to create a curriculum for teachers where they are sensitized about these issues. It's there from where something can flow, some positive effect can come. I think that is one important intervention which is possible. All of us realize the problems. We are familiar with those problems, and at times the solutions have also been talked about. The problem is in terms of implementation, how to bring change. And that is possible only if we engage schools, if we engage teachers to change the mindset of the whole, all the agents which are involved in the learning process. Learning, creating a curriculum in moral education is not going to help. It's not only what you learn in school. Your TV program is, providing all kinds of learning. Newspapers, magazines, so the whole media is so strong. I think in many of the homes, TV is almost always on. We don't have even control over the needed hours of exposure to these gadgets for children. Parents don't know. They want to do something, de diya usko, do it, enjoy. It's very important. It's going to change. It has already, started things. And this effect is a very serious problem. We have seen many events in Noida, in Gurgaon, in Delhi schools where students have indulged in very difficult circumstances. So, my humble submission is that this meeting has started with a very genuine concern, and we have to consolidate some of the ideas, maybe only 2-3 ideas, and engage the schools in terms of reorganizing their learning process and learning activity. I will stop here and thank you very much. You have thought about providing me time to discuss, and I think there are many issues which require our attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for the wonderful lecture. We now have to wind up our session here, and we'll resume the second day at 10 a.m. tomorrow. And the session is on how to introduce universal ethics into various disciplines and fields in contemporary education system. Thank you and see you tomorrow.